in 2018, I experienced a type of crisis that actually turned to be the best opportunity ever. Because there you have more scholarships for women's players than men's players, which maybe not everyone knows. I feel like I made so many of my own dreams come true, like through other people, and actually offer the absolute best players in the world to college coaches. And it just naturally, okay, why don't we do this together?
For years, women's football wasn't just underfunded, it was held back by design. Fewer investments, fewer teams, fewer pathways. The US changed that. Thanks to Title IX, American colleges now invest at a level unmatched anywhere in the world. With team budgets exceeding $3 million and scholarships worth over $350,000 per athlete. And that investment fuels the pro game too. Record-breaking attendance, rising transfer fees, and soaring franchise valuations in the NWSL, making it the fastest-growing women's sports league in the world. And in 2025, the NCAA will double the scholarships cap for women's soccer from 14 to 28, unlocking even more opportunities for players around the globe. It's a game changer, but access is just the beginning, because a girl can be one of the best in her country and still go unnoticed. That's where Linnéa comes in. Unwilling to accept the status quo, the former athlete didn't wait for change, she became it. With 59 Sports, she built one of Scandinavia's first agencies dedicated entirely to supporting female footballers. In this episode, Linnéa joins Chris and Tony, the founders of Mind Game Sport, to talk about how a massive corporate setback turned her into a founder, the origins of her work with Mind Game Sport, and why together they believe US college soccer has the power to change lives. Let's get into it.
Welcome back, everyone. Mind Game Sport Podcast Episode 2. I'm so excited with the two guests that we have on the show today. Obviously, as you can guess already, we are going international. This podcast episode is going to be in English, half Swedish. Välkommen, Linnéa. Gave it my best go. But yeah, I'm very happy and excited about this episode. Let me introduce both of you real quick. Tony Mamodali, obviously founder of Mind Game Sport, now transitioned into the role at Right to Dream as the technical director. And also very excited for Linnéa to be here. Linnéa is the head of women's soccer at Mind Game Sport and also managing partner. So welcome both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and great Swedish in the beginning.
Yeah, again, gave it my best try. I'm not gonna promise you more of that, but let's continue here. We made a decision at this podcast to leave, an episode with a cliffhanger for the next guest. Last episode's cliffhanger was, "Don't waste any crisis." That's the phrase. That's the statement. And I'm asking you, Linnéa, how would you apply that to any scenarios in your past life, current life, or how would you use it in future situations?
Wow, that's such a good question. And
Must also come from a very smart person.
Yeah, I can't really remember who said it, but
not wasting a crisis. Actually, that's a really good intro to how I started my company that then eventually joined forces with you guys. So back in 2018, I experienced a type of crisis that actually turned to be the best opportunity ever. So it started with me not being able to log into my work email. So I was working for an American agency and just couldn't log in. And I reached out to one of my bosses and I was like, well, I can't access my email. Is there something wrong with the server, or is it just me not being technical? And turns out that it was going to be a lawsuit between the owners of that company because one of the owners stole a lot of money from the company. And I, in one way, freaked out because I obviously didn't want to work for the person that stole money in case he would have won the lawsuit. But on the other hand, I was like, just became extremely calm somehow. And the idea popped into my head that I hung up the phone and just went on to Google and was like, how do you start your own company? And just like started Googling that basically out of nowhere, because it was just something that clicked, and stayed up all night just researching. And this was not something that I had thought about before. I was super happy with working for someone else as long as I liked what I did. But when I woke up the next day, I was just completely in love with the idea, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So about a week after this, I had already started with the logo, the name, came up with everything, and it was like I was just in this kind of flow state of just, this is what I'm doing now. And yeah, that's like, what, 7 years ago now, almost.
Wow.
You know, that's first of all very inspiring. Second of all, if these cliffhangers work this well in episode 2 already, we're gonna keep going with them for sure. But also love how you smiled through everything you just talked about, and we call it a crisis. So clearly, out of every crisis, there's something good that comes out of it. But yeah, I really appreciate the insight. While we're at it, why don't you give us a little bit more insight of what we discussed last episode, how we got to the US, how we use that pathway, and kind of give the viewers your opinion on what it meant to you and everything leading up to your US journey.
Yeah, so my US journey started when I was super little. I saw this movie, I don't know if you guys have seen it, Bend It Like Beckham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that Keira Knightley?
exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
Is that why you remember it? No, but I saw this movie, and at the end of the movie, the two main characters, they end up going to Santa Clara University. And this is back in, I think, 2003. And at the time, you couldn't really play professional as a girl or as a woman. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, there is a way to actually keep playing and like doing that as your main thing. And it just looked so cool also to being over in the States. It was like, that's when the dream started. And then I like had that in the back of my head, but I guess I didn't really think that that was possible for me in a way. But then one of my teammates when I was in high school, she ended up going to the States and playing over there. And when I saw that she did it, I was like, well, I guess I can probably do that too. And she helped me a lot in guiding me towards how that was actually
Was this
possible.
also your first time in the US, or have you been to the States before starting that journey?
I had never been to the States before I went on the plane
So
to
how
move
exciting
there.
was that?
That was, I remember it so clearly. Do you guys remember when you sat on the plane, like when you were actually moving there?
Well, obviously we all studied in Florida, and I'd never been to the States, so the dress code I picked was not really the best choice for Miami and Florida weather.
Same
so
here, leather
Clearly
jackets.
clueless before I started.
What did you pick?
Well, just long sweatpants, a hoodie, everything, and I got out of the airplane. I was like, "What is going on?" But yeah, so first time in the U.S. for you, new chapter. Did it help you to have a mentor in high school that has walked that path before?
Yeah, 100%. That was both what kind of opened that door up to just for me to know that it was actually possible. Both in my head, but also like more practical of what to do and what the steps were. And yeah, that definitely helped me a lot. I don't know if I would be sitting here today if it wasn't for her. Yeah.
So before you opted to go the US route, was there a lot of Swedish girls who kind of picked that pathway, or was that just the beginning of something new?
I think it was not as big then as it is now, or at least I didn't know that many people that went. It was just this one person that I told you guys about already that opened it up for me to know that that was possible from Sweden and not just Keira Knightley.
She's not Swedish, by the way.
That's what I meant. No, but I hadn't really seen it a lot, and
Talk
wasn't
us
aware of that was something that you could
talk
do.
us through how you ended up at your school and kind of the decision making and the process leading up to that.
Yeah, so because of my friend, I actually ended up hiring the same agency that she was working with, and basically told them that I wanted to have obviously play good soccer, but also have summer all year round. Um, and my original dream was actually to go to California. I don't really know why. I think I just had this vision of California, but ended up in Florida and turned out to be the best thing ever. Yeah, but that was a big reason that I ended up specifically there geographically, because I also realized like you have this big country where you actually have the opportunity to play anywhere in that country, and why not pick more things that you want, more than just soccer, and that can be the football can be a way to actually make other dreams come true, and just like you can have everything that you want. And I know back in Sweden, and I guess you guys too here in Germany, it's like, oh, summer is great, but people are miserable during the rest of the seasons. And I didn't want that.
So the other 364 days of the year.
Valid point.
Very good, very good. You talked about, you know, pro football a little bit and how obviously the US is, you know, known for having a very structured setup for professional football. During your time at college, did you know you wanted to stop playing football? You wanted to go down an entrepreneurial road, or how did that process happen for you?
So my plan was always, since I was super young, I always envisioned myself playing professional. Like even if it wasn't possible, really, as a woman at the time, which luckily now so much has changed. But back then, that was the only thing that I had in my mind, and I saw the US as a pathway for that, and also kind of as the only option to actually keep playing full time and chasing the football dream, because I knew that if I would have stayed in Sweden, even if I would have gone to the first league, which at the time when I left I was in the second highest, but even in the first league, you couldn't really make a living off of it, which luckily now you can on most teams, but at the time that was not really the case. So the US was the dream for that too, where you could actually keep playing and doing that full time.
Very cool. And to kind of fast forward, obviously, it's one of your main drivers, internal drivers, to now help other talented women to achieve those goals and maybe open doors that you never were able to explore because there just wasn't any opportunity. And that kind of brings me to the next point, is your story and how it intertwines with us and how we kind of, you know, joined forces. And now I'm going to head to Tony, because obviously we've had some talking time now, but let me get your opinion or your insights on why and how we joined forces with Linnéa.
Yeah, I would say it was actually quite a natural progression. So we met through a common friend. I think it was Hitch, through the Swedish Chamber of Commerce, which was back in 2015 when I was still in my master's, and I think you too.
Yeah, I was in
Yeah.
my bachelor's.
Yeah, and so we were both at the. So I think I was a year into the agency, and we've been sort of touching base every other week and bouncing ideas off each other, and then I've been following actually what she's been doing on the women's game, and it was really impressive just to see the amount of national team players that she was popping out of the system, and really the placements that she's done and the impact that she had on all these girls. And then we also started to grow as an agency. Obviously, you came on board, and then we looked at basically the network that you had developed, obviously what you've done on the pro side as well. I remember that picture with Benfica at Benfica Lissabon, which was basically your breakthrough moment. And then it was quite natural that we said, actually, it makes much more sense. We can create many more opportunities if we actually collaborate and join forces. And fast forward 4 or 5 years later, I think it's quite mutually beneficial for both of us, and most importantly for the guys and the girls that we're working with, because ultimately the impact and the proof is in the pathways that we've built in the last couple of years.
So would you say the shared values and the shared vision of what we try to achieve was kind of what glued everything together?
100%. I think
so it wasn't just the agency colors,
no, it was
gold and black.
No. It's. I would say ultimately it's the same thing as for the players that we're working with. Is that we want to work with good people, and Linnéa obviously being a fantastic human being first, and then obviously the values of the agency, which is a natural progress as well, because obviously she founded it, so her values trickle down into the agency's values, and so that was quite natural. And ultimately, the most important thing is we want to work with good people, and I think that can say that with confidence that we've been doing that quite successfully.
Yeah, and I also think the ability to branch out and create even more opportunity on the women's side in Germany, on the men's side I would even go as far as saying Scandinavia as a whole. Obviously having worked with a few Finnish men's and women's players. But let me jump to you. What was your I guess decision making in joining forces, and why you made a conscious decision of working together and going forward together?
Very much what Tony just said, but I think it was almost like we founded kind of the same agency, but from different angles, but still so many common touch points. I think it was one time when we just discussed our different agencies that we just realized that, wait, we have here, it was like two pieces of a puzzle, kind of like, wait, this just fits really well, like we should put this together, and both on a value-based idea that everything that you just said with the people that we work with and how we operate, but also out of a very strategic, geographical, and just elite perspective. Because obviously, on my end with agency was a big focus on the women's side in Sweden and Scandinavia, and with you guys on the men's side, majority of the men's side in Germany. And obviously Germany is one of the best football countries in the world on the men's side, and on the women's side too. And Sweden is as well. So that just naturally made it like we have some of the best. We can actually offer the absolute best players in the world to college coaches, and it just naturally, okay, why don't we do this together?
Very cool, very cool. You mentioned there being a lot of touching points in what we do and how we kind of found each other, almost like an intense love story that was just meant to be.
That's what you said.
That's what I said. my words, my quote. You can clip this, but that love story also has lots of different moving parts on the men's and on the women's side. So let's dive into the differences of the two markets, and what differences also we have to work around on the men's side that we don't have on the women's side. Why don't you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is so cool about the US college system in general, as a women's player, like both speaking from my own perspective, but also all the women's players that have gone that route, is that in general, both in the football world, but also in the world in general, you often have a little bit fewer opportunities as a woman, while that's actually not the case at all in women's soccer, because there you have more scholarships for women's players than men's players, which maybe not everyone knows. And
Can you, for our viewers, just again even dive deeper into that, because obviously that's big news for any young aspiring woman that's trying to come up in that same system. Why do we have more opportunities and more scholarships on the women's side, and why is it a competitive advantage compared to men's soccer? Or, by the way, let's agree on men's football for now. So moving forward, we call it football. But if you can share some insights on that specific fact, I think that's very valuable for the viewers.
Absolutely. So one of the, or maybe the main factor is that there's this law called Title IX that I think was implemented in 1972, but don't quote me on that.
Fact
because
check.
I think you're right on that.
You fact checked it.
Somewhere around that time. And I know the tennis player Billie Jean King was one of the like big characters behind that whole movement. And what this title or this law says is that there should be the same funding and scholarships for both men and women. Like there should be no discrimination. And how that plays out is that when you look at American football, right now there's only American football for men or for men's players. And that means that in all the other sports, for it to be equal in terms of scholarships, you actually have more on the women's side. So especially like women's soccer, since that's the one we're talking about, there is, what is it, around five scholarships more per team on average.
Yeah, for data lovers that are listening or watching this show. So obviously based on the size of the rosters that you have in American football, where you have 45 plus players on the team, that makes 45 full scholarships. And basically the athletic programs have to make sure that there's an equal amount of scholarships available for other sports. And so that trickles down into women's soccer or women's football and other sports that only exist on the women's side. That's why, for instance, if you go to the University of Miami or University of Alabama,
Florida State,
all
these programs.
yeah, you name it, you won't find a men's soccer program, but just a women's soccer program, because they have such big American football programs. And so it used to be the case, or it still is, but it's going to change in August 2025, that you had 9.9 full scholarships on the men's side, so men's soccer Division 1, and 14 on the women's side. So it's 5, as you said, 5 scholarships more on the women's side. But in 2025, in August, you'll actually have 28 full scholarships on the women's side, which is, yeah, massive, because it just doubles the amounts of opportunities that you actually have.
So it's a very well implemented numbers game where we're trying to equal the opportunity for female athletes.
Exactly.
Which creates more opportunity. Now, going back to the agency side, that obviously helps, right? Is it very beneficial to work with higher numbers, higher volume of scholarship money? Correct?
Yeah, 100%. That just gives more opportunity to more players. And I think it's also worth to highlight that obviously all the rest of the investment into every college department or like athletic department is also like all the athletes obviously can use the facilities and everything that just gives you so much resources and just everything available to you in order to become a better player.
Yeah.
Did these opportunities kind of create more awareness in the Swedish market? You know, for players to be contacting you, or even on the women's side in Germany contacting us. We can speak out of experience, but just on the Scandinavian market and viewers from those countries, is there a raised awareness and higher numbers that are trying to go that route?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I also think it has to do a lot as well with, obviously, when we went, which is not that long ago.
We're old. It's kind of a long time ago.
No, but I know that I think Instagram came like my 3rd year of high school. like 2011, around that time.
Yeah. So when you were how old?
Like 17, 18.
Okay.
So my first year in college, it wasn't really that big with social media.
Yeah.
And now that it is, I think it's also, it raises the awareness when everyone can see all the facilities and how everything is over in the States compared to even some of the best men's pro teams over in Europe.
Yeah, but I would even go a level higher. If you look at the success of the women's national team in the U.S., that brought a lot of attention to women's soccer in the world, in contrast to other parts of the world. So the U.S. basically had, I would say, 15, 20 years advantage in terms of developing infrastructure because there was more attention. DAZN has brought out this very brilliant campaign, I think 2 or 3 years ago, when they made women's soccer or women's football available for everyone on the DAZN platform, called "We All Rise with More Eyes." And I think if you look at that phrase, how we rise with more eyes, the US basically had that advantage 20 years ago, and it reinvested the revenues that it has been generating from sponsorships, from media revenues, from TV revenues, especially through the national team, into developing their programs both in college as well as on the professional side, which is also why the US has been for a long time the best team in the world. But now other teams in the world are catching up. But I would just like to go back to that point, because you remember when we visited. So last year we went and visited Clemson and
Yeah.
UNC, and that was, for me, that was unbelievable. So even if you look at some of the facilities in the Bundesliga or second Bundesliga, or you look at the Premier League, and we went to Clemson first, and the team manager walked us through the facilities. So it's the same for both men and women. And we walk in, and then he says, we wanted to pass the door, but we couldn't because it was locked. And then he says, "Oh, just step aside. Give me a second." So he steps aside, and he puts in like his 4-digit code, and we're like, "Oh wow, wow, cool. They have a locker room that's protected by a code." Actually, I just remember that time we went, it was no longer the code, but it was actually
fingerprint.
It was a fingerprint.
It was a fingerprint
It was
already.
a fingerprint, and we were like, "Holy shit!"
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna bleep that out, but it's fine.
So it's actually it's a fingerprint sensor, and we're like, "Oh wow, this is unbelievable!" And we spent, I think, 3 hours on the road. And it's like, "Have you seen that fingerprint sensor? It's ridiculous. We don't have that in the Bundesliga." And we drive up to UNC, and so obviously UNC being one of the most successful women's soccer programs in history ever. We tell that to the team manager there, and it's like, "Oh, it's unbelievable. We just got back from Clemson, and they've got a fingerprint sensor." And then he's like, looking at us, like we were from a different planet. And then he's like, "Okay, let me show you our locker room." And he just bends down, and he holds his his eye to the sensor, and the door slides open. So they don't have a fingerprint sensor, but actually an eye scanner. And that was actually for us like this mind-blowing experience about the facilities and infrastructure that you have in the game, and the money that is actually not only being generated, whether that's through the game itself or actually through Title IX, as you said, but then it's really being invested to creating the best infrastructure that you can possibly build.
Also, a little side story about UNC, and this is off topic, but let's talk about the facilities. We toured UNC, and the director of soccer ops walked us through campus, and we walk into a basketball arena, and there's a Michael Jordan museum in the entrance of the arena. We walk through the door, and we see an amazing stadium. Like, you wouldn't see that in professional basketball in Europe anywhere. And he goes, yeah, it's very nice for a practice stadium. And Tony and I look at each other and we're like, "What do you mean practice stadium?" "Yeah, we built one around the corner. It's, I don't know, 45 million. It's state of the art. and it holds 25,000 or whatever. I'm making up a number, but it's a, you know,
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
it's a facility that we can only dream of in Europe. So that experience was crazy as it is, but I'm sure with some of the women that we work with and you work with especially, they've experienced something like that on their campuses too.
Yeah, I also remember when I was the first time at it to visit Saga, Jontoft, UCF. They also had that fingerprint opening the locker room, and I was just like, this is insane. And speaking about basketball, I was also, I can't remember if it was either University of Miami or University of South Florida. But I got a tour from the coach around campus, and he was like, "Oh, just have to tell you the story. Like, this kind of funny to mention to players." So one of the girls on the basketball team, she last weekend in the game, she hurt her finger in the first quarter of the game, and they weren't sure if it was broken or not. So if she should continue to play or not. So she just walks over to the next building, like 50 meters to the medical department, gets a finger scan or MRI or something, and they realize, no, it's not broken. Like, it's not going to get that much worse if you play. We can deal with it later. Gets back into the game, second quarter.
That is wild. You know, we're headed off topic, but I like where this is going because this really shows what attention athletes get in the US. You know, we can all speak of experiences where we've seen it firsthand. You know, my first semester in Boca Raton, and I shouldn't be saying this, sorry coach, but we went out on a Tuesday to an Irish pub, and one of the elite basketball players, which I obviously didn't recognize, walked into that bar, and the attention that person was getting was unheard of. I'd never seen, obviously, except talking about some of the top, you know, football stars in Europe, playing for Real Madrid, Barcelona, maybe Bayern Munich. But that was something I'd never seen before. And that was a student. That was a freshman, sophomore, whatever he might have been. And I think that is crazy. And maybe we can talk about those experiences a little bit because it's interesting for the viewers. But the attention athletes get, not just on the money side, talking about scholarships, but overall academic support, by tutors, by professors, by the whole school, and also, you know, classmates, anyone in the city, really. I thought that's mind-blowing. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I would actually say that it's quite common. So it's not even an outlier. Just to give you an example, which I find fascinating to this day, is Dana Castellanos. She used to be a forward playing for Florida State, so for the Seminoles, and she was actually she won the third place at the 2017 Ballon d'Or while playing for FSU. And when she actually signed after college with Atletico Madrid, she had already, I think, 3 million followers on Instagram, which is just speaking into the relevance and the masses that actually female sports attracts. And I think there's even a stat, and don't quote me on it, but I think Atletico Madrid won around gained around 1 million followers when she signed for Atletico Femminini. And that's actually just one example. And I would even say that was at the very beginning. Now actually we're entering into this NIL space where also the rules have changed a lot. But where obviously brands are tapping into that market because they actually recognize that they can benefit from their names and images and likeness.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into the rule changes here in a little bit. Do you, Linnéa, have any real life experiences of stardom of some of the college athletes you've seen, maybe worked with, or just came across?
I can't think of a specific one right now to bring up, but I think just in general, it's such a different landscape from what you can even imagine. That it's not pro, but it's definitely feels like it's almost more than pro.
For sure. Let's now jump into the rule changes and NIL money, for example. For someone who's not familiar with college soccer, the whole college world in general, Describe in simple words what NIL is, what it means, and what it changes for everyone.
You want to go or should I go?
Sure.
Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors.
No, but it has changed a lot in terms of what college has been and what it's becoming, in terms of what you can do as an athlete. Because there has been a lot of rules before that you're not really allowed to make money while you're in college or even before.
And that's a very interesting detail I wanna kind of talk about. Explain to the viewers how it's possible for some of the college athletes to play in front of 60, 70,000 week in, week out without earning any money in the past. It's
Yeah.
an interesting fact. So if you want to speak on that a little bit.
And that's why all the money all the money has gone to the organization or the school, which has also spurred the change, I think, because there's been protests and just a lot of people raising that question, like, these are the athletes that are actually responsible for all this revenue that is
Creating it.
yeah, exactly. They are the ones creating it, but they haven't benefited financially. Obviously, getting scholarships and you're getting your education paid for and you're living and so on, but it's still a big gap from what you probably should be making because you are the one that is playing. And that has now, well, there's still a lot of ongoing debates and laws in the making, and the whole landscape is not fully clear of what it will be, but there is a lot of changes, and it's moving in the direction that now you can actually make money off of your name and your.
Well, that's the interesting part. We're not talking about salary, so let's take it a step back further. What does NIL stand for?
Well, it's names, images, and likeness. And just to show you some of the absurdities. So the NCAA basically came up with the term student athlete to justify that as a student athlete, you are basically compensated via a scholarship, which is fantastic. But at the same time, they also used it to basically shield or come up with an excuse while all the revenues that they're generating through TV deals, through sponsorship deals, to media deals, to ticket and front gate revenues, and to shield that in a way that they don't have to share it with the athlete itself. But some of the absurdities that came up on the back of it is that you could be a A-level football quarterback with 5 million followers on Instagram, but you couldn't actually offer clinics or actually coach younger kids, even on a recreational level, using your name, because the NCAA would rule that as professional. And if you would be ruled a professional, you would lose your eligibility. And so I think that the NCAA just went too far with its regulations, and that's what caused all that stir and caused all that, so many people actually trying to find a way to break the rule.
So lots of confusion in the past with NIL. Maybe both of you talk the viewers through how is this going to impact our athletes going forward? How can they benefit potentially, and what opportunity is it going to create for them?
Yes, I would say quite literally.
And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
So we're thinking big. We're thinking 5-10 years down the road now.
Yeah, I would say that it actually the opportunities are quite limitless, quite literally, and it's really difficult to understand how actually that is going to shape the future of the college game. Because if you have your big city markets, you have your college programs competing with the big city teams in the NBA, in the NHL, in the NWSL, in MLS, in the NBA,
MLB,
and you name it, in all the big leagues. But if you go to smaller markets, you don't have any competition from the professional leagues, and you only have your big college programs. And so brands can pour in much more money into these markets because they know that there is no competition. And at the same time, these colleges can also ask for much higher prices which is going to change the dynamics of these programs and the competition across the country a lot. And so it's really, really difficult to understand what it looks like if there is not a mechanism in place to somewhat regulate that space moving forward.
And those new legislations combined with some of the other rules the NCAA is implementing right now, change of season to a calendar season, to adjust to pro soccer. Some of the athletes who can graduate early to already now join the professional ranks earlier and more smoothly. Would you agree that it's just a good time to, obviously we're marketing this, but to start this chapter now for anyone?
100%. And I think everything that we just touched based on is moving in the direction that it used to be that there were some still more positives maybe in some cases, and especially on the men's side with all the opportunities there are on the pro side, where it's like, yeah, you have all these advantages with college, but you're still not going to be able to make the same money that you would be making as a pro. And that has now been almost like, yeah, you can actually do that now also in college sports. So that adds that like even more of an advantage to go the college route and takes away the disadvantages compared to playing pro right away. You can still do that after too, or go for 1 year and then go into the pros. So I think that it just, in so many, even more cases than before, it just makes it a no-brainer if you want to continue, go all in on your sport and play as a pro, but still get your education, another, everything that comes with moving across the world and going outside of your comfort zone as compared to staying in your home country and all the other.
Did you want to? You wanted to add something here? Yeah, I could already tell.
Yeah.
You got excited. I didn't want to skip you, so here you go.
Yeah, because I noticed that I was coming from a sort of uncertainty perspective, talking about NIL and how that's shaping the landscape or reshaping, but actually that's not the truth, because we're building on a system that, especially for women or for girls, has been fantastic anyway.
Yeah.
And especially from an international student perspective, if you look at the actual graduation rates of women's soccer student athletes, you actually have the highest across all team sports in NCAA, so it's at 95%. So that being said, if you look at the perspective of an international student athlete, it used to be the case that you come to the US, you get a full scholarship, you graduate from a school with a very valuable degree, obviously with plenty of experiences, a good network, language skills, and blah, blah, blah. But now you actually even get compensated for it. For me, it's fascinating.
Good times to move to the US for college sports, that's for sure. I want to create a hypothetical scenario for a young, talented, up-and-coming woman that is exploring this route. Let's talk about some real-life examples of some of the women you worked with, and their pathway to the US and how successful it can be and hopefully is going to be.
Yeah, I feel like I made so many of my own dreams come true, like through other people. So some of the things that I thought was like, oh wow, would be so cool. This
By
is
the way,
something.
that's such a beautiful way to phrase it.
Thank you.
I really mean it.
I mean, you kind of feel like a proud parent in most of the cases of the people you work with. And one thing that I, thought was like too good to even be on my radar is going to Yale, or like an Ivy League school. And one of our players, Nana Young from Finland, she was already on the Finnish youth national team, and also played in the top league in Finland. And when she reached out to me initially about going to college, she was very clear about the fact that I wanted top education, and it also needs to be a top program because I'm already at the top here in my country. It needs to top that in all senses. And I was like, yeah, well, challenge accepted.
She's not
Let's-
leaving just for any program. Like she's leaving the top to go further.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
she wouldn't have left if it wasn't going to be better in all aspects. And she had some schools in her mind. And when you look at combining the two, I think everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people know that the Ivy League is a really good academic conference, obviously, with some of the best schools in the world. But it also is actually one of the best athletic conferences, and especially on the women's side, where some of the top teams compete in that conference. And when she got an offer from Yale, that was actually not even on her initial list because it was like, oh, maybe it's a little bit too late because she was not super early in the process and they typically recruit super early. But it was actually a injury of another player that opened up another spot on the team. And she went through that whole tough process of not just a normal, it's a long way with the whole process, but also an Ivy League acceptance process on top of that. And now she's actually even become the captain of Yale. And that's something that is so mind-blowing to me to even be able to say, like, we have the captain at Yale University.
And I agree with Tony. You phrased it beautiful. You made some of your dreams come true through other people's pathways. And I think this is probably something we talked about earlier about shared values and why we sit here and why we try to open these doors for other people. And I think I couldn't have said it better. To be able to do that is even better than doing it yourself in a
It
way.
really is.
And
So
sorry to interrupt
Yeah, go
you, but I think the only thing that's even more powerful and even more beautiful is if you pass this thought pattern onto other students that we work with. So I remember exactly, and you remember this as well, that Nana was actually the one that met with Anton while
Yes.
Anton was on a visit at
Right.
Yale, because Anton was also getting into Yale. And that was something that came really, really natural because she wanted to help him and she wanted to walk him through her experiences at Yale at the beginning. And she's already been there for 2 years. And so that is actually, if we're able to give this thought pattern to other players that we're working with, I think that's ultimately our mission wrapped up in one powerful example.
Yeah, and by the way, context for the audience, Anton Siren, Finnish background, but grew up and played in Berlin. So German-born and based player who ended up getting help from Nana, who's from Finland, went to Yale. I don't think there's any better real-life story of what we're trying to do, so I'm going to wrap it up with that. But the one question that Marie asked us in the first episode, I'm going to ask you, Linnéa, as well. What's one thing that all these experiences leading up to where you are right now have taught you? Maybe two things, one or two things.
Yeah, so one thing is that not all the stories that you tell yourself about yourself are true. So I remember that I never thought I was an entrepreneur or like creative or anything in that sense. And I think it was actually our common friend, Hitch, that contributed to this in a way, because I remember when I worked at the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, back when we first met, he told me that, because he was my boss, and he said that all of us that go to the States from another country, we are entrepreneurs because we went out of our comfort zone, we moved across the country. And I remember when he said that, I was like, but not me. Like, I don't really agree with that statement, and I don't see myself that way. And maybe it was even a big part of that once that whole thing happened with the agency that I was working with before, maybe those words, like from Hitch, actually clicked. That, oh, maybe I kind of adapted that form of thinking subconsciously and just, was able to become that because someone else said it, even though I didn't believe it myself.
We have to work, all of us, we have to work real hard to get this message in front of every young aspiring woman out there, because I think that's really powerful. So we're gonna wrap up with a cliffhanger for the next guest, which we're not gonna announce yet, but any of you can come up with one, and that's the end of the second episode.
I had one, but I forgot it.
So no third episode, no cliffhanger, no third episode.
Wait, what was I gonna say?
We'll give you a few seconds. Maybe you have one. Maybe Linnéa has one.
I have one.
Perfect. Go ahead.
You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.